Rain tapped gently on the coffee shop windows, blurring the outside world like a half-remembered dream. Inside, under the flickering glow of a worn-out ceiling bulb, Emma wiped down table 7 for the 3rd time, though no one had sat there all day. Her apron smelled faintly of vanilla and old memories. She wasn't expecting anything to change. Not today. Not ever. And then he walked in. Tall, quiet, and dressed in a tailored navy coat that didn't belong to this part of town. The stranger sat at that same table, table 7, and looked at her like he knew she was drowning, even when she hadn't said a word. His eyes didn't flash charm like most rich men did. Instead, there was a stillness in them, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm. She brought him coffee, hands trembling just enough for him to notice. And when their fingers brushed for the first time, her breath caught in her throat. Not from romance, but from something deeper. Recognition, maybe, or fear. A week later, she wore white. People whispered, "A millionaire marrying a waitress? Must be a game, a bet, or maybe he was just lonely." Emma didn't care. Or at least she tried not to. She smiled through the photographs, held his hand at the altar, and thought maybe, just maybe, this was her second chance. Maybe some people really do get rescued. But behind every fairy tale, there's a door that shouldn't be opened. On the morning of the 7th day, Emma stood barefoot in their mansion's garden, clutching a small music box her grandmother had once given her. It had survived fire, heartbreak, and 3 moves, always playing the same delicate tune. She hadn't touched it in years. That morning it played on its own. And for the first time, she noticed something strange about the way the flowers swayed in the wind, how the gardener always avoided her eyes, how a certain room at the end of the hall was always locked, always. She asked him once what was behind that door. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, "Some stories are better left untold, but silence has its own sound." Like the ache behind her eyes when he turned away too quickly, or the way he froze every time she brought up the word family. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just lingers in the corner of the room, waiting, and Emma felt it, in his stare, in her bones. This isn't just a love story. This is a story about what we choose to see, and what we try so hard to ignore. What would you do if the person who saved you was also the person hiding everything from you? Would you open the door? Or would you pretend you never heard the music box playing? Let me take you back to the beginning. Emma sat on the edge of the velvet bench in the hallway, the music box cradled in her lap like something sacred and breakable. Its soft tune still echoed in the corners of the house, delicate as breath. She hadn't wound it, she was sure. And yet it played, just like it used to when she was a child hiding beneath her grandmother's quilt, trying to block out the sound of shouting in the kitchen. Her fingers brushed the worn edges of the box, tracing the tiny roses carved into its lid. It had been a gift the day her parents left her behind. Her grandmother had said, "When everything feels too loud, just listen. This will help you remember who you are." But in this house, even the music felt like a question she couldn't answer. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the sky a soft, bruised gray. Inside, the air smelled of something distant. Sandalwood, old paper, and silence. She walked slowly past the closed door at the end of the hall. It stood like a question mark at the end of a sentence she didn't want to read. She reached for the doorknob, paused, and then walked away. Again, she hadn't really known Daniel. Not truly. She realized that now. In the rush of falling into something that looked like a miracle, she never stopped to wonder who caught her. He had been kind, yes, gentle even, but there was a weight in him like he was always watching something she couldn't see. Sometimes, when he thought she was asleep, he'd sit by the window, jaw clenched, staring into the night like it owed him something. She wanted to ask what haunted him, but the words always died on her tongue. Emma remembered the day he proposed. They had only known each other 3 weeks. She was restocking napkins at the cafe when he placed a simple ring beside her coffee cup. "Let me take care of you," he said. "Let me give you the life you deserve." She had laughed, not from joy, out of disbelief. No one had ever offered her more than survival. But when he looked at her, really looked at her, it felt like standing in sunlight after too many cold days. She said yes. But now, each warm moment played in her mind like a trick she wasn't smart enough to catch. One night, she dreamed of her childhood bedroom, where shadows danced across the walls and her mother whispered promises she never kept. She woke up crying and found Daniel already awake, watching her. He wiped her tears, but didn't say a word. And in that silence, something passed between them, something she couldn't name. Why did the music box start playing again now? Why had she never seen his family? Why did the gardener flinch when she said she wanted to explore the West Wing? Sometimes, it's easier to hold on to a lie than face a truth that could shatter you. And Emma was starting to feel the cracks. That night, the rain returned, this time heavier, almost angry. It slammed against the glass like it was trying to get inside. Emma stood by the tall window in the guest room, her reflection barely visible in the fogged-up pane. She wasn't sure why she'd chosen to sleep there instead of beside Daniel. Maybe she needed the space. Maybe she was scared of what she'd see if she looked too closely. The music box sat on the nightstand, silent now. But the memory of its haunting melody lingered. It reminded her of being 10 years old, watching her mother leave with a man Emma had never met. She'd clutched the box then, too, begging it to sing something that sounded like love. But music never lies. It always plays what's hidden. Downstairs, laughter echoed from a closed room. Daniel on the phone with someone. His voice was too light, too rehearsed. Emma pressed her forehead to the glass and wondered what he was laughing about, and who he became when she wasn't around. The next morning, she walked the long hallway again. This time, she stopped outside the locked door. She knocked softly. No answer. Just the sound of her own breath and the ticking of an old grandfather clock down the hall. She thought of asking him about it again. But the last time she did, he brushed it off with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Some things are private," he had said. The way he said it made her feel small, like she didn't belong in the truth. Later that day, she visited the garden. The gardener, a man named Elias, worked with his head low, hands moving methodically through the rose bushes. She watched him for a while before asking, "How long have you worked here?" He paused. "Long enough. Do you know what's behind the West Wing door?" His hands trembled for a second. Barely, but she saw it. "Some parts of a house aren't meant to be lived in," he said quietly, then returned to his work. Emma walked away, her heart thudding. That sentence, it felt too familiar. It reminded her of how she used to avoid her own room when she was a teen because it held too many echoes, too many ghosts. That night, Daniel brought her dinner in bed. Candlelight flickered between them. He smiled as he handed her a plate, but his hands were cold. He asked how her day was. She lied, said it was fine. She watched him eat, wondering how many versions of him existed. And if the one she married was just a shadow. How do you love someone when your heart is stuck between trusting them and protecting yourself? What do you do when home starts to feel like a stranger's skin? And what if the truth isn't just hidden, but buried? Emma was beginning to understand that some doors don't stay closed forever. They creak, they whisper, and eventually, they open. The storm hadn't let up in days. It was as if the sky itself refused to stay quiet, echoing Emma's thoughts in every thunderclap. The house groaned in the wind, old wood and secrets creaking like bones. She hadn't slept. Not truly. Each night, she lay staring at the ceiling, the music box still perched by her bed like a question that kept asking itself. On the 6th night, she found herself sitting on the staircase at 3 a.m., wrapped in one of Daniel's sweaters. Her eyes stung with the weight of unshed tears, and her fingers curled tightly around the hem of her sleeve, like if she held on tight enough, she wouldn't come apart. Somewhere down the hall, that door, the one that had been quietly haunting her, seemed to breathe. Just once. A creak so soft it could have been the wind. Or something else. Daniel came down the stairs silently, his footsteps like whispers. When he saw her sitting there, he paused. "You okay?" he asked softly, almost carefully. She looked up, eyes glassy. "You ever feel like you're inside a life that doesn't fit you?" Her voice cracked at the end. He sat beside her, the silence thick between them. "Sometimes we find ourselves in beautiful cages," he said. "And the worst part is, we decorate them until we forget they're cages." Emma turned her face away, biting her lip. "I think I've been decorating since I was a kid." Smiles. Manners. Trying not to ask too many questions. "I don't even know if I know how to be real anymore." Daniel said nothing for a long time. And that silence, his silence, felt like an answer she didn't want. The next morning, she waited for him to leave. Said she was tired, needed rest. He kissed her forehead, said he'd be back by lunch. His touch was gentle, but her skin burned where his lips had brushed. As soon as the front door shut, Emma stood in front of the West Wing door. The key. She didn't know where it was, but she had seen Daniel place something in the drawer beside his desk once. Quietly, like he was hiding a piece of himself, she found it. A small brass key with initials etched faintly into it. Not his, not hers. Her fingers shook as she slid the key into the lock. The door opened with a sound like a sigh. The room smelled like dust and loss. Soft light streamed through old curtains, lighting up a piano in the corner, untouched but cared for. Photographs lined the fireplace mantel, of a woman with dark eyes and a boy in her arms. The woman wasn't Emma. There were drawings on the wall, childish, crayon-colored hearts. Names written over and over in a child's hand. A name she didn't recognize. One that hadn't been spoken. In the center of the room, on a shelf, was another music box. Identical to hers. Emma staggered back. Her heart slammed in her chest like it was trying to break free. She reached for the photos again. And this time, she noticed the date etched on the frame. April 12, 2017. She remembered Daniel flinching when she once told him about a storm that had nearly drowned her hometown that same month. He'd gone quiet, looked away. She thought he was bored. But now she knew it was something else. Grief has a face. She saw it now, clear as day. The boy in the photo had Daniel's eyes. She stumbled out of the room, the walls narrowing, the house suddenly too tight. Every sound was louder. Her heartbeat, the creaks, the whisper of wind beneath the door. By the time Daniel returned, she was sitting in the garden, the music box open in her lap. Rain soaked through her dress, her hair, her skin. She didn't feel cold. She didn't feel anything. He stood in front of her, not speaking. She looked up at him with wide, hollow eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" He sank to his knees in the mud. "Because I didn't want you to leave." She stared at him, tears mixing with rain. "But you never let me in." And just like that, the beautiful cage broke. Or maybe it had never been beautiful at all. Sometimes love hides. Sometimes grief wears its face. And sometimes we only understand someone when we finally see the room they've locked away. The real question is, once you've seen it, what do you do next? Daniel didn't speak. He just sat there, soaked in rain and silence, his hands buried in the wet soil like he was trying to anchor himself to something real. Emma waited, her chest hollow but heavy, like something vital had drained out of her and left only ache behind. She thought the music box had been hers, a relic of her past. But now, staring at the nearly identical one from the hidden room, she wasn't sure anymore. What if it had never really belonged to her? What if it was always about her, the woman in the photo? "You said you wanted to give me the life I deserved," Emma whispered, her voice shaking. "But all this time, You were building someone else's life around me. Daniel blinked slowly, like her words stung more than the rain. I thought I could start over, he murmured. That if I loved you hard enough, I could forget what I lost. His words fell like glass between them. Emma clenched her fists, not knowing whether she wanted to scream or break. You didn't fall in love with me, Daniel. You fell in love with the idea of saving someone again. The wind howled through the trees, and for a moment, it sounded like a child crying. That night, Emma packed a small bag. Not because she knew where she was going, but because staying meant lying to herself again. As she reached for the music box, ready to leave it behind, something shifted inside her. She turned it over and noticed a small inscription beneath it. Faded, barely there. 4 a.m. So you'll never forget the sound of being loved. M. Her grandmother's initials. Her breath caught. This was her music box. Not a replica. Not a copy. Hers. The one she thought she lost during the fire when she was 15. Her knees gave way, and she dropped to the floor. The memories flooded back. Of strangers sifting through the wreckage, of the shelter, of someone gently handing her a blanket and whispering, "You'll be okay." She hadn't remembered his face until now. It was him, Daniel. He had found her before the cafe, before the ring, before everything, and he had never told her. Emma rose slowly, her face pale with the weight of realization. This wasn't just about a hidden room or a dead past. This was about a man who had been watching her life from the shadows for years, waiting, quietly writing himself into her story, page by page, until she turned around and saw only him. And now, she wasn't sure if she had ever been choosing him, or if he had always been choosing her. The storm had finally passed. Morning light poured through the windows like something holy, softening the sharp corners of the mansion and making everything feel too still, like the world was holding its breath. Emma stood in the room behind the west wing door, the music box in her hands, the past unfolding in her chest like a wound being touched for the first time. She sat at the piano, the same one from the photograph, and placed the box on top. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. Daniel stood in the doorway, pale, silent, almost ghost-like. "You saved me," she whispered, not turning to look at him. "Back then, after the fire, you found me when I had nothing, and then you disappeared." He stepped forward slowly. "I didn't think you'd remember. You were so broken. I didn't want to be another scar." Her fingers dropped onto the keys, playing a simple, sad melody. The music box clicked open beside her, as if answering. Both songs played together, one human, one mechanical. Dissonant, beautiful, tragic. "You didn't scar me," she said softly. "You became the story I didn't know I was telling." Tears welled in her eyes. He came to kneel beside her again, the same way he had in the garden. But this time she didn't move away. "I tried to recreate what I lost," he admitted. "The woman in the photo, our son. I thought if I built a world with you, I could finally fix what couldn't be undone." Emma touched his face gently. "But I'm not her, and I can't be the life you lost." The silence between them was no longer cruel. It was necessary, honest, the sound of forgiveness without forgetting. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the small brass key. She placed it in his palm and folded his fingers around it. "You can keep building houses around ghosts, Daniel," she said, her voice steady. "Or you can start walking through the world with your eyes open." She stood, left the music box playing behind her, and walked out into the hallway, the light catching her like it was only just noticing her there. As she passed the front window, she paused. The rain tapped gently on the glass, like it had that first day. The opening line of her story had returned, but now it meant something else. Rain tapped gently on the coffee shop windows, blurring the outside world like a half-remembered dream. Only now, she wasn't the girl waiting to be rescued. She was the woman walking away. Outside, Emma stepped into the light. No umbrella, no suitcase, just the music still echoing behind her, and the sound of her own breath finally filling her lungs. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive to save you. Sometimes, it arrives to remind you that you can save yourself. And when that moment comes, will you stay in the story someone wrote for you? Or will you write your own? Tell me in the comments. Emma didn't look back. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she walked past the gate, the mansion slowly disappearing behind her like the fading memory of a dream that had gone on too long. The air was still damp, but the storm had passed. In its wake, everything felt quieter, like even the sky was taking time to heal. She found herself back at the cafe 2 days later. Same corner table, same soft hum of morning conversation. But something inside her had shifted. Her posture was different now, less guarded. Her eyes no longer searched for approval in the faces around her. She wasn't waiting for a miracle to walk through the door. She had already survived one. In her coat pocket, she still carried the music box. It didn't play anymore. The mechanism had stopped, the key refusing to turn. But she didn't mind. It wasn't broken. It had simply finished its song. Like her story with Daniel. Beautiful, haunting, and done. Across the room, a young couple laughed, hands brushing nervously as they sipped coffee. Emma watched them with a softness in her expression. Not envy, not sorrow, just recognition. A mirror held at a distance. She touched the box gently, fingers running over the carved roses. A symbol of her childhood, her loss, her rediscovery. It had once been the only sound she trusted. Now her silence held more meaning. Elias, the gardener, had sent her a small envelope before she left. Inside was a note. He's letting go. It's time you do too. Tucked between the folds was a single dried rose from the west garden. Pressed flat, still red, still holding on. She kept it with the box. Emma's gaze lifted to the window. Outside, it had begun to rain again. Not heavy, just enough to blur the world into soft watercolor. And in that blur, she saw it all differently now. The pain, the love, the secrets and silences. They weren't chains anymore, just threads in the fabric of who she'd become. A little girl once clutched a music box, begging to be remembered. A grown woman now carried it with quiet grace, knowing she no longer needed it to be whole. A server asked if she wanted her usual. She smiled. No, something new. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes quietly, in the sound of your own voice choosing something different. What do you carry with you? What have you let go? And when the song ends, will you keep dancing anyway? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know.